Welcome back to the Purpose Babe Show. I'm your host, Corie Clark, and I am so glad that you are here and tuning in. I hope you are having an amazing start to your week. We had a great weekend. We went out just as our little fam to celebrate my daughter Morgan's birthday. She turned 19 last week, and that makes me feel old because I was 19 when I got married. So I might have to have Ryan on one episode. I'm sure he's just going to love me saying that. He's the one who edits my episodes, so he can hear me saying that right now. But I think I should have him on and we can talk about our story and share some marriage tips or something. But anyways, I was 19 when we got married, and we've been married for 24 years. And it's crazy to think that I now have a 19-year-old daughter who could be getting married, but she's not. So that's good for now. Anyways, I just am feeling a little bit old, but I'm also just really excited about where we are as a family and where we're headed. And I can tell that you guys are excited too by the response to last week's episode. I've been sharing a lot about money and building wealth. And last week's episode, if you haven't listened yet, I shared 10 revenue streams for a personal brand. And I also shared what my favorite one is. But I'm just excited because I want to help you build wealth, not just me. And I want to help you build wealth and be able to leave a legacy for your family. And, it's not just about having a side hustle or a fun little business. I mean, that's great if that's what you want, but how are we spending our days and our time? And if you're going to spend your time building something, then it should be building you wealth, and you should be taking that revenue that you generate and making that revenue make you more money. So we are going to have a lot of fun episodes coming up, and I'm sharing a lot on Instagram and on the blog. So make sure you're following me all the other places. I've been working really hard on shifting my money mindset, and it's been really fun and exciting, and I'm learning new things. I'm learning stuff about the stock market, and I've never done that myself. Like, we've had money invested and let other people do that stuff for us, but I am watching stocks now. I'm putting money into them. I'm watching them, dip and go up, and it's really fun to learn and to actually be doing it myself. And I'm obviously not an expert, but I just want to challenge you, if there's something in regards to money that you've never done before or you've never tried yourself, try something new. It's really fun. And, you don't have to put a ton of money in while you're learning, and, you can let the experts do that for you. And I'm definitely not giving you advice, so don't, get mad or try to sue me or anything. But I will be sharing some of that information as well. So, I'm excited for what's to come, and I'll be bringing you a lot of fun information and tips, and I'm interviewing people on the subject of money. And if that makes you cringe or if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then I want to challenge you to be open to it and just to listen and to be open to new ideas, because I think a lot, at least I know for me and from people I talk to, a lot of our money issues really are because of our mindset and not because of, principles. Yes, those go hand in hand, but it's usually the mindset stuff that holds you back from actually generating wealth and abundance. So don't be afraid and just come along for the ride and see what happens and be open to new things. So, okay, today's episode, I am interviewing my friend, and she's one of my business besties. Her name is Csilla Muscan, and Csilla is a highly engaging keynote speaker and speaking mentor to online business owners and educators who want to leverage their knowledge and grow their business by speaking on stages. Inside her Speaker Accelerator program, Csilla loves teaching her unique Magnify Message Method to her students to help them step on stage and in front of more audiences as a confident speaker. So Csilla and I have been friends for a few years now. We've been part of a peer-based mastermind, and now we live in the same town now that I moved to Tennessee. And so we're doing a lot more in person, dreaming and scheming together. So in fact, we actually are working on something for you, and I'm really excited about it. We're not going to be sharing any details until next week, but it's going to be something fun, and we're combining our expertise to bring you something amazing. So make sure that you are following me and Csilla. I'll have links in in the show notes of this episode for her, and make sure you tune in next week, because that's when I will be announcing how you can see what we are doing together. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. Please meet my amazing friend, Csilla. All right, you guys, I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, Csilla. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Corie, this is so fun. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you give a little introduction about how you got into the business that you're in now? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So I'm known as a speaking mentor who helps personal brands and entrepreneurs know how to speak on stages to grow their business. And the way I got started at the very beginning was that I was a performing artist from the time I was 17 years old. I always loved singing, loved music, and knew that I wanted to be somehow on the stage. And so I started touring and singing as a professional when I was about 17, 18 years old. And got to tour around the world, loved every minute of it, except for maybe the exhaustion of sleeping in a different bed every night. But other than that, just really enjoyed touring. And then in 2000 it was around 2012 when I decided that I wanted to go out on my own, and also started speaking on stage. I was asked to share my story. I also never thought I was going to be a speaker. Honestly, I never had a desire. In fact, I had this phobia, which most people do, of speaking in front of a group of people or in front of audiences. And I found that I really enjoyed it, actually, and really got sucked into the whole knowing how to master your message and speaking skills, and how it gives you the ability to really be able to communicate your ideas with people and influence people. And so I gotten on this journey of just really wanting to master how I spoke, and that turned into me starting in just an online community of other women who are wanting to share a message or have a business or have a personal brand, and they really just want to become better communicators. They want to become more effective messengers of their own companies, and they also want to grow their business by taking their message to more audiences and bigger platforms. So that's
Mm.
kind of like the short
Yes.
short story.
I love it. I love it. I still I can't wait to hopefully once all this COVID stuff's over, or the next time you sing somewhere, I want to see you sing. I mean, I've seen like videos and stuff of it, but I want to
Mhm.
see you sing in person. So,
Oh, thank you.
yeah. We actually, so Sheila and I met in Orange County, but now we live in the same town in
Yeah.
Tennessee. So it's really fun. And we're actually part of a mastermind together. So I am soaking in all of her amazing tips. And one thing that I wanted to ask you was like, so for someone as like me or you, somebody with a personal brand, how can we like weave in speaking into our business? Um, I don't know, maybe like organically. So someone like me, I don't necessarily want to be a professional speaker, but how can I use speaking to help grow my business?
Yes, that's such a great question. And I think it's definitely not something that most people probably think of. They probably, I'm guessing you didn't think, oh, I can use speaking as a marketing strategy for my business.
Right.
But if you think about it, I think it's such a great way to really take your message to more people.
Mm.
And so I definitely wouldn't recommend a personal brand who is just starting out. So someone who's just starting to build their business or just starting to really get an understanding of what their personal brand is going to be about. I wouldn't recommend starting there. So I definitely would say that speaking probably is more for established businesses that are already quite clear on what their message is and now are ready to up level. But speaking really is such a great way to establish yourself as a credible authority in your niche, because when you are able to speak for 45 minutes or for 90 minutes on a specific topic and you can prove that you are knowledgeable enough in that industry, people automatically look at you as an authority, which sometimes can feel like it's an unfair advantage, but
Mhm.
it really is. So as soon as you step on stage and you start speaking around a specific topic, people are going to start looking at you as a credible authority. I remember the first time I stepped on a stage and I was introduced as a keynote speaker. And even though I really just only talked about my personal story and my transformation, when I was done and went to my table, people were asking where my book was, if I would sign my book for them. So it's somehow there's this idea around public speaking that you are just a leader in your
Mhm.
field, right? So that's one thing. I think it's so much easier to establish credibility when you start speaking in front of people. Now, I'm not talking about just physical stages, obviously. Nowadays there are so many wonderful opportunities to speak virtually. In fact, with COVID, that's pretty much what we were left with, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Not a lot of physical stages to speak on, although now I think we're getting back probably more into it. But um, I think any way that you can get yourself in front of an audience, whether that's by being interviewed on a podcast or doing a guest presentation for somebody's membership group or a Facebook group, even live videos on social media. That's a form of a platform, right? A
Mhm.
stage. Um, and so I think one of the things that I always tell my students that if you can get yourself 3 or 4 times a month in front of somebody else's audience, you are going to see tremendous growth in your
Mm.
business, in your email list growth, and also people signing up to work with you or join your programs.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true because I feel like, at least for me, I can get so caught up in the just, keeping up with my own audience and trying to show up for them and email them and, produce content for them that I forget to actually put myself out there to get in front of
Mm,
other people's audience to help that grow.
yeah.
So, what are some tips? Do you have some tips for doing that? Like, let's say somebody just really has never even put themselves in front of other people's audiences. And especially since right now, like you said, we're still kind of in that like COVID age and we are starting to break out. But like, what are some tips for someone who really wants to get in front of some other audiences? Like, what are some of the skills they should work on? Or, maybe some things that they should really like hone in on before they start doing that?
Yeah. Great question. So I think the very first step would be to first really know your own message and be able to communicate that message in a concise and clear way. So basically elevator pitch, right? If
Mm-hmm.
somebody asks you, who are you? What are you about? You're going to be able to tell them in a sentence or two, in a clear way, right?
Yeah.
Um, the second thing is to really understand your own audience. So that's where knowing your ideal client comes in, because then from there on, the third step would be, okay, where does this person hang out? What kind of podcasts do they listen to? What kind of Facebook groups do they hang out in? Whose programs have they joined? Or what kind of conference do they attend? What kind of virtual summits do they sign up for, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you know your audience and you know who they're following on social media, which podcasts do they listen to, then you can start creating a list, which this is not something that I came up with. I learned it from Russell Brunson, but he talks about, your dream 100 list, or 100 dream list, or dream 100. I can't remember how he puts it, but it's basically where you start creating a list of all the platforms or stages that you would like to speak on.
Mm.
And then from there on, you would then start cultivating a relationship with those people, because this is a long game, right? We're not playing here success overnight.
Yeah.
And so you always want to make sure that you give and give and give first before you make an ask. And then you need to have some sort of a pitch that you can then read when you reach out to and make that ask,
Mm-hmm.
to have an introduction that you make. And it's again not about you, but it's about the person that you're reaching out to. One of the things that I have seen for me and the students that I have helped work like magic is to really approach the host of the podcast or the event planner from the perspective of, you are doing such an amazing job. I feel like this is where I could fit in and make you look like a rock star in the process in front of your audience. And this is how I could be of value to your audience. And they're a lot more receptive
Mm.
to having you on. And
Yeah.
then of course, I'm you want to be able to then have, I usually tell my students about three specific topics that you're gonna pitch. You're gonna say, this is the exact result that I can talk about, or these are the specific benefits that your listeners are gonna get when they listen to the episode that we do together, or when they tune in on for the training that I'll be doing. So usually I have three topics, and each topic it's kind of like a mini talk basically, but
Mm-hmm.
it's tailored for you can have it tailored either for a big presentation or for a podcast episode or for like an interview or something like that.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I know that
Yeah.
that's a lot.
No, no, it totally does. My mind's like rattling off. Like, okay, so you said like we need to know our audience, but then I guess you would also, if you're going to pitch yourself to get on someone else's platform, you kind of need to know their audience too, right? You need to know, because you said you need to know like how you could best serve their audience. So is that part of your research process? If you were going to pitch to someone like Russell Brunson, you would kind of need to know like who he's serving and how you can help them, as much as you do need to know your own audience.
Yes. So that it's kind of two things with that. First is, I usually don't pitch myself to hosts
Mm-hmm.
that um that their audience doesn't fit me. You know what I mean? So their
Mm-hmm.
audience is somewhat similar to my audience,
Yeah.
basically. But yes, so you definitely, the second part of that answer is that you definitely want to take some time in that process to research and understand who they are, who is their audience exactly. But nowadays it's pretty easy to figure that out. Like if you go on, for example, let's take Instagram as an example, and you go under the hashtag podcasts or um, podcasters or whatever, you can find a lot of accounts that have podcasts, and they will say in their bio, I help or I
Mm-hmm.
serve. And you can immediately say, for me, I know if they have an audience of personal brands, entrepreneurs, business owners, or coaches, that's kind of my audience. And so
Yeah.
I know we have a similarity,
Yeah.
something in
Okay.
common.
Yeah, that's great. So what are some, like, do you have any practical tips for people who, like, they haven't done this yet? They're going to start putting themselves out there, getting on other platforms. Like, what are some actual, like, skills that they need to be able to communicate their message?
So you're talking about actual speaking skills,
Yeah,
right?
like, or yeah, in communication, or, how can they prepare themselves best for, like, actually when they are going to be speaking, whether it's, maybe it's even just for their own Facebook Live that they've
Mm-hmm.
never really done before. They're finally going to put themselves out there. Like, what are some practical things they can do to be prepared so that they can communicate their message well?
Yes, yeah, very good. So first, again, you want to clarify of what topics you are going to be speaking on. So this is going to be probably easy for somebody who's already a pretty established personal brand. You
Mhm.
kind of know your top three topics that you usually kind of center around, right? So
Yeah.
I always tell my students that you have a theme, kind of like that's the umbrella. And for me, that would be speaking and presentation. That's kind of like my overarching theme, right? But then underneath that, I have my top three topics that I usually talk on. That is, speaking skills, presentation, and then how to promote yourself onto stages. um, and so you kind of need to know what exactly are you going to be speaking on, because when you start pitching yourself, then you're going to be able to, you have to be able to speak on certain topics. You don't want to be speaking on everything, because just like in the online world, if you're speaking to everybody, you're speaking to nobody, right?
Mhm.
So you kind of have to know exactly what specific topics you're going to be speaking on. um, and then the second thing would be then preparation, and this is such a big thing for me, because really there's no other way to go around becoming a better speaker than preparing and then actually practicing. So
Mm.
basically,
Mhm.
knowing exactly for a talk, for example, what is your one objective, what is the one outcome or the one thing you want people to walk away with, and then creating an outline, right? So you want to have a strong opening, which usually is a story. A story is a great way to open up a talk. And that this goes for a live video on Instagram. This is the format that I use for my Facebook lives, for my Instagram lives, for my own podcast episodes. I usually like to start out with a good hook, a good catchy kind of title or a sentence that hooks people in, then go into a story, and then do an outline of, usually I do either 3 to 5 supporting points.
Mhm.
There is something magical about the number three. And then have at the end, you kind of wrap up by telling people what you just told them, and then you have a call to action. Right. So you want to have, before you start pitching yourself or doing a live video, you want to have a clear understanding of what you're going to be talking about and what are the supporting points you're going to make. Then
That's
before you
really good.
speak, you definitely want to practice. So I have been doing this for years and years. And even to this day, if I know that I'm doing a presentation, I will practice my talk 10 times before I
Wow.
deliver it. Now, I'm not saying memorize. I would never recommend anyone to memorize their speech, but to know exactly what catchy title you're gonna start out with, what stories you're gonna use, and what points you're gonna use. So have just an outline that's maybe even in front of you, and then practice that, practice
Mhm.
the delivery, practice of how you're going to project, how you're going to stand, what are you going to do with your hands, because the more you practice, the more comfortable you're going to feel
Mm.
when it is time then to deliver. And then the
Mhm.
final thing would be is to watch people who are masters at presenting. One of the first things I did, even before I started doing keynote messages, I was studying people who are world renowned and amazing speakers, people like Tony Robbins, or I remember watching John Maxwell's his speeches, and Marie Forleo. These people are so amazing at what they do. And I would just study them and make notes. What are the things that they
Mhm.
do? And that is extremely helpful. And then this new thing, Clubhouse. If you don't
Yeah.
want to be on video and you just want to, practice speaking, it's a great way, I feel like, to get going with speaking in front of maybe a smaller audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good idea, actually, because I've only used Clubhouse a couple times, but there is really something about just practicing. Like you
Mm.
said, obviously practicing your speeches, but even just getting comfortable with your message, with, if people ask you a question, knowing how to answer it. And so Clubhouse is it's, I don't know, it's more forgiving and it's more casual. So
Mhm.
it's a great way because I remember my very first time I was interviewed on a podcast back in 2014 when I wrote my book. I was scared to death. But honestly, like after the interview was over, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was so fun and so easy." And then the more you do them, the easier they get and the better they get. So, Clubhouse, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Um, do you actually, so I know you said, obviously practice when you're going to be giving a speech, but do you practice like before you do like an IGTV or anything like that? Or is it more of just like an outline?
No, not anymore. I used to, when I first started doing them,
Mm-hmm.
just because I tend to be such a perfectionist when it
Mm.
comes to, which is, it's a good thing and not a good thing. But no, I don't practice anymore. But I still write out um, exactly what I want to touch on, and I always make sure that I start with the objective. What is the point of this video that I'm doing?
Uh-huh.
So it's again twofold. What is the purpose of the video? Meaning, I'm doing this video because I want to get more leads. I want people to subscribe to my email list, because then that's gonna define my call to action. Where do I send people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if it is just to inspire and engage with my audience, then I'm gonna continually ask them to comment, to respond, right? So
Mm-hmm.
depending on what the purpose of my live is, that's really gonna determine the call to action. But then also, what is that one major point, one major key that I want my audience to walk away with? Because I feel like nothing's worse than when somebody sits through a presentation, and that can be a 5-minute live video on Instagram, and people are like, okay, so what was this all about? I don't
Yeah.
quite understand. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good advice. I love that. And I have done the same thing. I don't necessarily practice it, but when I'm going to do maybe like a 3 to 5 minute Facebook Live or IGTV or whatever, um, I do have an outline. I kind of have some points I want to bring up, but I really like that you're even intentional with, if you're just trying to build community and you're trying to get engagement and actually like making a point of like, comment and let me know, really being intentional about the objective and the call to action. So
Hmm.
those are great points. Thank you for that. I'm literally taking notes as you're talking. um, so how do you think, for some people, I know obviously practicing helps boost your confidence, but for someone who's just really fearful of pushing record or pushing, going live, like do you have some tips for them on how to like get past that, build their confidence and move forward?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I used to be one of them. I got really, really nervous before I had to speak. And I found some practices that really helped me. So one of the things, before we speak on a stage or anywhere, we tend to we tend to ask some really bad questions of ourselves. And I think we're already setting ourselves up for and I don't want to say failure, but in a way feel like we're going to mess up, because we start asking questions like, what if people are not going to like me? What if, what if I mess up? What if I'm going to forget my words? What if I'm going to, and so what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in a frame of mind that's already in a state where we feel defeated.
Mm.
And so what I started to do instead, I would start asking questions that are helping help set me up more for success. And so I would always focus on my audience, reminding myself that I'm showing up for that person, right? For my people, right? And that person needs me to show up today.
Mm-hmm.
They need to hear what I have to say. And then questions like, what if the one thing that I have to share today is could potentially change their lives, or could potentially create a paradigm shift for them that then puts them on a different path, or creates change in their life. And then immediately it then puts me in this frame of mind of, oh, I'm here to help and I'm here to serve. And when you're here to help and serve, nobody cares about, if you forget a couple of words or if you're nervous,
Mm-hmm.
people are still gonna get a lot out of it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when we're nervous, we tend to stop breathing in a way. So one of the things that I learned from my vocal trainer is that you need to learn to breathe deep into your diaphragm. And when you do that, you're also becoming less anxious, because basically when you're anxious, you're not breathing very deep,
Mm.
and that actually cuts off blood flow to your brain. And so it makes you even more anxious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just even taking 3 or 4 really big breaths, where you're counting in for, when you're taking the breath in, so you're counting in for 4, you hold it, and then you breathe out for 8 seconds.
Mm.
And when you do that, you will notice that almost like even your shoulders are relaxed, and you start relaxing. And then I think I heard this from Colin Boyd. He's a mutual friend of ours, or mentor of ours. And he talked about how there's this trick even that he learned from a psychologist friend of his. But when you're breathing in, just look around the room and name 5 colors, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then that actually, what that does, it brings you back to the present moment. It brings you back to being present in your body, because what happens is you get up in your head, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what creates the anxiety. And so right before you push live, right before you step on stage, you take those deep breaths, and then you name a few colors, and then brings you back, and then, okay, let's go.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good advice. Yes, I have heard him say that before. Um, yeah, there is a couple tips too. Like he gave one, like if you're going to start to cry, to like look up into one of the corners. So, it's funny because I cry really easily. So I will do
Mm,
that. Like if I'm somewhere, I feel like I'm going to start crying. I like
yeah.
look up to like one of the corners of the room and it totally helps.
Yes. On the other hand, I feel like, okay, so you definitely don't want to like ugly snot, snot
Yes.
cry on stage. That's definitely not helpful. But what I have noticed is that if I do let myself get emotional, it really actually helps me connect with my audience, because they
Yeah.
can tell that this topic is really close to my heart. And actually, I feel like it helped, connect me better with my audience.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's really good. So what would be like for someone who wants to really grow their influence and really start to be like the authority and the go-to person, and really like how can they take their message and really create influence and not just like, like, oh, that was a great keynote. Like how can they turn it from like a great speaking gig to actually creating influence on the audience that they're talking to?
Yes, that's such a great question. And that's something that I learned the hard way, because, I felt like I was pretty entertaining when I was speaking on stage. And, I would get claps and people would say, "Oh, this was so inspiring." And then, nobody would sign up after my
Mm,
webinar, and
mhm.
nobody would come to the table and buy stuff, And I think it was when I signed up to the John Maxwell speaker training, I learned the difference between speaking and then speaking to influence and
Mm,
speaking to help people make a decision, move people into taking action. And so there's definitely a framework around, and this is something that I also teach to my own students.
mm-hmm.
When you see those speakers that are, presenting on stage, and then afterwards people are like sprinting or throwing their
Yes.
credit cards at them and say, I cannot wait to join your program. That doesn't happen by accident. They are
Mm,
following a framework, they're following a system, and their speech is crafted in a way that it moves people to make a decision, right?
mm-hmm.
And so really the difference is that people who speak for influence, they really help people disassemble, is that a word, disassemble old beliefs, and then help them create a paradigm shift, I guess, build a new belief, and help them move in a new direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it usually comes with telling stories. Stories are a great way, really, to connect with your audience, and then also to have that call to action, and give them a new direction to go in, right? So kind of like a visionary, they're able to paint the future in a way
Mm,
that makes people motivated and move them into action.
that's really
But then
good.
as far as like creating, you were talking about setting yourself apart as a credible authority online. I feel like nothing can beat that than creating content.
Mm,
So I always come to online. I used to be a consumer. I was always in a consumer mindset. Oh, I'm gonna just hop on Instagram. And it made such a huge difference for me when James Wedmore was talking about how if you want to establish yourself as a credible authority, you got to be consistent in creating content that other people are able to consume. So first be a content creator, second be a consumer. And so
mm,
I think having a platform where you consistently release and create content. It could be a weekly podcast. It could be a weekly blog post. It could be a weekly YouTube video or an IGTV. I don't know. There are different ways to go about it, but I
mm-hmm.
think that's one of the greatest ways to establish yourself as a credible voice in your niche.
Absolutely. That's great. That's really good advice. And it's something like I really struggled with last year, just with COVID and moving. And it honestly feels so good to be creating content again, to be
Hmm.
recording a podcast again, to be putting up blog posts and posting social media. And so, for any of you that are feeling that you're in this slump, just it feels so good to get out of it. And that's the
Yeah.
only way you can get out of it is by
Yeah.
just doing something, posting something. And it's so true because if I think about some of the content creators that I follow and that I look up to, and they're consistent. They
Hmm.
are consistent. They are posting something, weekly. They're recording a podcast weekly. They're posting on
Hmm.
social media, and it's keeping them at the front of my mind. And so, yes,
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
I
just
was just
in agreement.
thinking about that the other day. Pat Flynn.
Mhm.
Um, I was listening to one of his podcast episode, and I think it was episode 650
Whoa.
something. I mean, I was thinking to myself, talk about consistency. And
Mhm.
he's been releasing a podcast episode every single week, right? So does Amy Porterfield, right?
Mhm.
And I think many times when we think of content creation, I know that many people can feel overwhelmed because we think, oh my goodness, I have to create all this different content for all these different platforms. And what really the only thing that needs to happen is you have to have one platform that you're creating one piece of content for a week, and then all of that can be kind of spread out throughout all of your social media platforms in a
Mhm.
really easy way when you have a system to
Yeah.
do that. But I think it makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's so awesome. I'm so excited that you have taken the time to share all of your expertise with me
Well,
and with my
thanks for giving me
audience.
the opportunity to do it.
I just like am soaking it all in, and I have all these ideas, but it like really just comes down to like what we were just talking about, to just be consistent and showing
Yeah.
up for your audience. And um that's so like, it's so simple, but it's, you
Not
just have to
easy.
do it. Exactly. It's not easy.
Yes. Yes. I think
Oh,
it definitely gets easier when you do stay consistent long enough.
yeah.
It becomes a lot easier. But
Hmm.
there is that, at the beginning phase, everything is harder. And usually that's when people tend to give up most often because it feels like, oh, this shouldn't be this hard.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
if you just stick with it long enough, it will become. And the same thing for speaking. I
Hmm.
still feel nervous anytime I hit the live button, anytime I step on stage or even in front of a podcast microphone, right? But it definitely became a lot easier when I just stuck with it long enough.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I have a couple more questions before I let you go. And I ask these every guest. I ask these questions too. So, the first question is, if you were talking to a new entrepreneur, they're just getting started, what is one piece of advice that you would give them?
Hmm. Invest in a mentor as soon as you can.
That is good advice.
Invest in the right mentor. I mean, do your due diligence because I think nowadays, there's a lot of experts out there and you have to take everything with a grain of salt, but invest in a coach or a mentor who is not 100 steps ahead of you, but who's hit a milestone that you want to hit
Mm-hmm.
recently, and they
Yeah.
can still it's still fresh in their mind and they can teach you how they did it. Now obviously not all the steps are gonna apply to you, but I think it makes such a huge difference when you have someone leading the way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice. It is. It's so important. And even just for the accountability factor,
Yeah.
because when
Yeah.
you try to do things on your own, you like really can be your worst enemy.
Yeah.
And so having somebody that is mentoring you and holding you accountable is going to make a huge difference. So that's
Yeah.
great advice. Okay. And then the last question is, what does living on purpose mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. So, to me personally, I truly believe that the message that I have to share and me showing up every day in spite of feeling afraid is my calling. And for me, that is to really help women not only discover their voice, and I don't even want to say discover their voice because I think we all know our voice. I think it's more trusting our voice and owning that voice and owning our message. And
Mm,
then courageously taking that message to as many people as they can. I feel like that's me living my purpose, showing up every day and doing that. Because in that, I also feel like I'm being a great example to my children and to my family. And when I am doing something that I love, I also know that I am a much better mom. I'm a much better wife, friend, and so to me, that's what it means to live on purpose.
I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you. I'm thankful that you do that and that you follow your purpose, because it is helping so many people. So where can people find you?
My website is magnifymessage.com. I would give my first and last name, but that would be way too confusing for people. So, magnifymessage.com is my website where, I usually send people, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you are also on
I
Instagram,
am on Instagram, and
and
that's
that
my
is your
first
name.
and last name. My handle is CSILLAMUSCAN. So
Yes.
Csilla Muscan.
Sheila. I know. And
Yeah.
when I first met you, I was like calling you Sheila, but it's Csilla.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 It's close to Sheila, but with a CH sound.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been called, I mean, no wonder because it's spelled so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been called Scylla, Casilla, Cecilia, Cecilia. So, yeah. I'll take all of those as long
Okay.
as long as people can spell it the right way, so they actually find me on Instagram.
Yes. Well, I'll put that in the show notes too. So thank you so much for all of your helpful tips and advice today. I hope that all of you go follow Csilla, that you listen to her, that you take her advice and listen to her wisdom, because she's amazing and she's killing it and she practices what she preaches. And that is very important to me. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Corie, thanks so much for letting me come. This was so fun. It was so fun to chat with you.
Thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. Like I said before, Csilla and I have something exciting coming. I will be announcing it on next week's show. We'll probably announce it on social media before next week's show drops. So make sure you're following both Csilla and I. I have the links for Csilla in the show notes. And for myself, make sure you are subscribed to the show, and please rate and leave a review. And when you leave a review, drop your Instagram handle so I can pop on over and send you a little DM and thank you for listening to the show. I love connecting with my listeners on my Instagram, and I am the one who's answering my Instagram DMs, and I just feel like it's a great place where I can connect. And if you want to connect further with other listeners of the show, make sure you join my free community. I have a link to that in the show notes. It's CorieClark.com/community. And I often drop our episodes in there early. And when I have a video of myself and who I'm interviewing, I put that in there. So it's a fun place to be, meet other purpose babes who are trying to live their life on purpose and grow their businesses. That is a great place to connect. And if you are not on the wait list for the Purpose Babe Society, get on that wait list. CorieClark.com/VIP. We've got exciting things coming this year for the society. All right, you guys, thanks so much for listening. I will see you right back here next week on the Purpose Babe Show. And I am actually interviewing a dear friend of mine, and we're talking about money and how she paid off a lot of debt. So I'm excited about that episode. Make sure you tune in. I will see you next week.